Today we're going to replace the capacitors on my original Nintendo 64 I've had since I was like 8. Fond memories of opening it up on Christmas morning with Mario Kart and GoldenEye. Fun fact, I gave up on GoldenEye until my best friend told me to shoot the lock on the first level. I swear I've gotten smarter since then. With my Everdrive, there are some games where it'll freeze and I have to reset like Conqueror here, but at the time of filming, I couldn't get it to freeze again. While the caps did look good, I'm invested in doing this now, so let's disassemble it, replace the caps, and get it back together. To help you along the way, I'll provide a picture of where each cap goes and where each screw goes because there are like 4 variants of 24 screws, which you don't want to mess up. Before we get started, PCBWay. If you're the type of person who can make a hardware mod, like an HDMI out mod I want to do, then you'll need someone for your PCBs. With no minimum order quantity, you can start prototyping today by uploading your design. PCBWay also offers PCB assembly if you want to offload more of the work, or even 3D printing and CNC machining, among many other products. Use my link in the description below to save $5 off your first order. To start disassembly, remove any game you have and the memory pack already in it, then remove 6 screws visible on the bottom, set them aside, and make sure to label them. Organization is key to getting anything back together without those extra screws. 1 extra screw could be okay, 3 extra screws should be an issue. With all the screws out, lift the top off, and I swear there are 24 screws holding it together, but they are different sizes and threads, so again, organization is key. During assembly, I'll provide a chart on what screw goes where, but just organize anyway. In general, the perimeter of the PCB has medium length screws, the game slot has longer screws, and the heatsink has little stubby screws. There are 2 longer machine screws that secure the memory pack slot. Remove all of these, and you should gain access to the main PCB we're going to replace the capacitors for. Now that the board is out, we need to remove the existing capacitors, clean the connections, solder on the new replacements. If you have a board heater and heat gun, it's probably the easiest method. My heat gun isn't great, and I had more luck using flux and my soldering iron to remove each cap. Be gentle, and when you create some space underneath, I do like to put my tweezers or a metal pry tool also underneath. I put a little upward pressure in there and continue to desolder. There are tools to make this easier, like a desoldering gun, but they're way out of my budget. I think the Hacko one is like $300, $350. Like in all my videos, do not force it. If it doesn't feel right, then stop. If you rip a pad off, you're going to learn the hard way how to fix that, or honestly just go to eBay and buy a cheap working one. You have the shell, just get one that's damaged. You're going to repeat this for every capacitor, and it took me about 15 minutes to desolder. If you don't trust your organization skills, then remove and replace these capacitors one at a time, but I have a nice drawing I'll put on screen of what goes where. Now that they're all off, it's a good idea to clean the pads. What I do is take my solder wick, cut an inch off so the heat doesn't creep up the whole roll. Holding it with some tweezers, add a little flux, I'll gently rub it on each pad. Ideally, most of the solder comes up, but maybe not all of it, and that's okay. Once all the pads are clean, you should tin them. Tinning is adding a little bit of solder, think enough to grab the capacitor, but not really enough to secure it. We don't want it to move once it's placed, and tinning does that for us. Put the soldering iron on the pad, and once the pad is nice and hot, add a little bit of your solder to it. Repeat for each of the 2 pads on all capacitor locations. Finally, we get to add our new capacitors. Once again, I'll put the diagram on screen of what goes where, and it's also important to note that there are outlines on the N64 PCB that match the black base of the capacitor. 2 90-degree corners and 2 beveled corners tell you the orientation. If maybe the kit you bought isn't obvious, the black ground side of the cap goes towards the 90-degree corners, and the beveled corners are the positive side. Place your capacitor on the pads with tweezers and heat one side with your soldering iron. I'll then put some pressure on the top and heat the other side. Repeat back and forth until it sits flush with the PCB. It's okay if there's a small amount of gap since they won't all cooperate, but get as close as you can to avoid any shorts or mistakes. Then, once you're happy, add a little solder to each side afterwards to make sure it's secure. Now you just repeat for every cap following the placement diagram. I found it easiest to work from top to bottom, so I didn't have to contort my hands as much for the caps that are really close and next to each other. Time to reassemble and test. First, put the lower RF shield on the bottom of your motherboard and place both into your Nintendo 64 shell. Be sure to add the AV output support plastic before you start screwing everything down. Then, sandwich your PCB with the upper RF maybe heat shield. You'll also have to orient 2 smaller pieces near the memory pack slot as shown. You probably noticed you have a few different screws. I'll provide a diagram, but on the perimeter, you'll want to use those medium length screws except for 2 long screws by the cartridge slot, which we'll actually do in a bit. The memory slot screws are long machine screws that took a surprisingly long time to screw in, so keep at it. The actual heatsink actually slides in under the RF shield by the memory pack slot, so double check you haven't tried to work ahead. Once that slides in place, you use all your short bronze screws to keep this in place, and you probably, hopefully, have a lot of them. I can confidently say the Nintendo 64 was never going to fall apart with all of these screws. So you do have 2 short black screws. Those go on the 2 bottommost holes of that heatsink because they also secure one of the memory pack RF shields. Finally, the silver screws to secure the power and AV inputs to the shell, and you'll be ready to close it up. When you are ready, slide the top of the shell over your work and squeeze it shut. There are no clips, but you want to make sure it sits flush with just a little pressure before completely closing it up. Use those 6 shell screws you set aside earlier that have the special top you needed, and pop your front feet on if they fell off like mine did. That's it. You're ready to game, and I still can't reproduce my freezing Everdrive issue, so it's fixed.